To support this bill. I commend it to the House.
Split call. Claire Curran, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 3 years ago, Mr. Speaker, I lost a very good friend to lung cancer. He was not only a good friend, he was a mentor, and I miss him. I started smoking when I was 15 years old. It took me, and I used to smoke Rothmans and some dreadful menthol product before moving on to Camel cigarettes and Marlboros. Now, it took me 20 years to kick that habit after several attempts, and that's not an unusual story. But you know what, Mr. Speaker, my kids say to me these days, they say, "Mum, how could you ever have put poison in your lungs?" And it's really actually quite difficult to answer that question, other than to say because it was addictive and because there was really, really strong marketing campaigns targeted at people like me. And that's why we have so many people in our country and in our world who smoke, because of the really clever marketing and because the product is so addictive. Mr. Speaker, in September, I think it was August 2012, the day that the High Court decision came down in Australia to uphold the world's first plain packaging law, and I know they're not there yet, but that was that date. The then Attorney General in Australia, Nicola Roxon, and the then Health Minister, Tanya Plibersek, said, quote, "This is a victory for all those families who have lost someone to a tobacco-related illness. No longer when a smoker pulls out a packet of cigarettes will that packet be a mobile billboard." Those ministers said that plain packaging was a vital measure which removes the last way for big tobacco to promote its deadly products. And over the last 2 decades, more than 24 studies had backed plain packaging. Now it will finally become a reality. Well, it's not quite a reality, but it's pretty close. And I really am proud of this Parliament tonight for sending this bill to Select Committee. And I want to say that the argument that is used by big tobacco, that the apologists that pretend that this is a debate about intellectual property rights or removing barriers to trade are wrong, and that has been proven. The sovereign right of Parliament to make its own laws on matters of public interest should be something that we should all fight for. I want to refer quickly to a paper called Packaging Phony Intellectual Property Claims, how multinational tobacco companies colluded to use trade and intellectual property arguments they knew were phony to oppose plain packaging and larger health warnings, and how governments fell for their chicanery. I urge everybody to track down that argument, this paper, and to read it, because it shows that the companies decided to fight plain packaging on trade grounds because it provided them a more solid footing than allowing health issues to enter the debate. For this reason, they focused their energies on the intellectual property agreements governed by WIPO and the investment protection contained in NAFTA agreements. Despite being told repeatedly by WIPO they had no legal basis for their arguments, there was no legal basis for any of those arguments, that their analysis was flawed. Those companies persisted in telling the government, and this was Canada, and the public, that plain packaging would be inconsistent with international intellectual property protections. Following the industry's misrepresentation of international trade law, new health ministers, thank goodness, in Canada and Australia, forsook plain packaging as a tobacco control measure they mistakenly believe to be contrary to their country's obligations under international trade agreements. Mr. Speaker, finally this battle is moving towards a conclusion. We're seeing it in Australia. We should not be taking notice of Big Tobacco's argument that this is an intellectual property argument, because it's not. There is no basis in law for that argument, and this Parliament should be commended by every New Zealander tonight for sending this bill to a select committee and for seeing it through the House.
Materia.